Drs Sari van Poelje. I'm the director of two businesses. One is called Intact Academy, and I train coaches and consultants from beginners to supervisor. And the other business is Team Agility, where I help businesses innovate their business more quickly than their products. It's after the summer and I decided to go back to basics. And back to basics is really working with individuals in organizations. We do a lot of work on teams and big scale change, but really the basis of our work is working with individual leaders so that they can influence the quality of life of the employees in the organization. The model I use to really coach these individuals, do executive coaching and leadership coaching, is called Transactional Analysis. TA was developed in the 1950s by a guy called Eric Berne and has been flourishing since, because it's really something that's very practical and very easy to explain to your clients as well. It gives models with which you can interpret behavior and really influence it. And that's what we want to do as coaches. One of the basic concepts that we use within TA is called ego states. And an ego state is a pattern of thinking and feeling and behavior that is really bottled in ego states. So really in the parent, adult, child. The parent is the behavior, thinking, and feeling that you inherited from your parental figures. It could be your biological parents, or it could be any parent figure, teachers, later mentors. The child ego state really contains the pattern of thinking and feeling linked to the pattern of behavior that you learned as a child to survive your childhood, as it were. Sometimes it's a reaction to what you had in your environment, and sometimes you develop that on your own. The adult ego state is the pattern of thinking and feeling linked to a pattern of behavior that is linked to the here and now experience. So that could be you at 5 years old, or you at 20, or you at 60 years old. It contains all the competencies you have to deal with the here and now. It's also the mediator between the parent impulses, it's the parent really programming, we would say, and also the child impulses. So sometimes you go, what should I do? What would I like to do? This is what I'm going to do. That's a typical pattern of parent, child, adult thinking. And we do that every day, all the time, really. You have a lot of patterns of thinking, feeling, and behavior in your parent, which are very useful in the world of today. You have them in your child and your adult. Some of them are functional, because they give you empowerment, and they give you permissions, and they give you potency, and they give you protection. And some are less empowering because you also learned some things along the way which weren't so very functional. So you can think of this structure of ego states as the structure of your personality. And as I said, you've got parent, which contains the introjects or the program of your parents. You've got child, which is really your patterns of thinking, feeling, and behavior that you learned in your childhood. And you've got adult. You can also think of them as your archive. So if you would think of an archive, one of those old-fashioned ones, wooden ones with 3 drawers, you can think of the top drawer as the parent drawer, the middle drawer as the adult drawer, and the bottom drawer as the child drawer. And when something happens in your life, you go immediately back to this archive and you pull open one of your drawers. And when you open that drawer, there are millions of files in there, because along the way, you've learned millions of ways to think, feel, and act. And all of these files are linked together. For instance, if someone holds out their hand and says, how do you do? Parent programming, oh, I've learned how to do this. You immediately hold out your hand and shake their hand as well. You go, okay, so I know what to do now. This is a parental pattern I've learned. Sometimes you come into a group, and some people have learned to be scared of groups. So they come in, open the child drawer, and they go, oh, group. Oh no, I think groups are scary. I feel scared. I'm going to sit in the corner. That's the behavior I'm going to show. So if you think of your structure of personality as a conglomerate of parent, adult, child, ego states, and if you think of that as your archive, which you open now and then to pick out patterns that you will use in a current situation, you've got a very good picture of an ego state model. Now, sometimes when you open these and these millions of patterns are there, we're kind of lazy. Because most people, they pick the patterns that are at the beginning of the file. So you open this drawer, you've got these things all here, you use them currently, your brain is lazy, it's used to it. So you pick out the things you use most. But you've got millions of files in there, and sometimes you've got to reach back a little bit and find a file which is more appropriate to the time today. So that's one reason why people do what they do. They have these files, they pick the ones they're most used to. The other reason people do what they do, and I'm thinking of my friend who's been married 4 times, and actually he's married the same woman 4 times, except in the younger version. I was thinking today, you know, why did he do what he do? Well, he just opened his archive, he picked the file that he knew at the beginning. I need someone to compliment me, you know, pick file at the beginning. But also you can imagine this archive as a conglomerate of millions of folders with these patterns in them of thinking, feeling, and behavior, where some of them are red and some of them are green. And because we have what Freud called repetition compulsion, other people called it different things, we are apt to pick the patterns that are somewhat red because it reminds us of things we lived through before. So I had a client who used to do these projects, and every time she did a project, she'd get a great result, but it was always out of time. So she always delivered it late. And every time she delivered it late, she'd get really a scolding from her manager saying, "You did great, but you did it late." And so she came to me really for coaching to figure out what she was doing. And we were busy with this archive, these 3 drawers. And I was going, "So when you start a project, what happens to you?" And she goes, "Well, I opened the child file and I look in there and I go, boy, it's really exciting, but I have to do well because else I'll get punished." And I go, "Okay, is that file red or green?" And she goes, "Oh, I think it's red." I go, "What does it say?" And she said, "Well, if I open that file, it goes, you have to do well because else your parents won't love you." And this seems like a really extreme example, but all of us have all of these files busy if we're at work or in private life. And I go, "So when you read that out, what do you feel?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm scared and I'm really a little bit sad as well." I go, "Okay. So if you're scared and sad, what kind of energy does that bring to your project?" And she goes, "Well, I'm not fully there. I don't use everything, all my full potential, because I'm also busy with this kind of internal conversation." And I go, "Okay, well, do you want to check out what's going on in your parent, file?" And she goes, "Okay." She opens that and she picks out a file, and I go, "Is it red or green?" She goes, "Oh, they're red." "Do you have green files in there as well?" "Yeah, I do, but I don't use them." So she opens this file and she goes, "Oh, it's my father." And I go, "So what did your father tell you?" And he said, "If you don't do well in life, you'll never do better than I did." And she started to cry. And I go, "Wow, that's, in a way, I understand that that's a burden, but it's also a huge permission to do well." She said, "I never saw it that way. I just never saw it that way." And so I asked her, "Tell me a little bit about her father." And she told me her father had started from nothing. He left home when he was very young. He built up a business himself, was very successful. But he taught her that, becoming, we say in Dutch, from a dime to a quarter, so going from nothing to being someone, is a very hard route. So he taught her she always had to work hard. But she didn't always want to work hard. So she didn't always obey this and didn't see it as a permission. She saw it as a limitation. And so in her doing really well, but never being on time, at some level, she was still protesting against this limitation instead of taking it as a permission. So there you see, you know, our personality is built up of ego states, parent, adult, child. And you can think of it as an archive. And when you think of it as an archive, you can imagine that you've got millions of possibilities of behavior. Sometimes you're lazy, you pick the one you know best, which might confirm your old story. And sometimes you pick red, which also confirms something old probably, but you have the choice. You can pick something that's further behind in your drawer, and you can always pick green.